how to conduct a deliverability test and why should we do that? It's key when you assess email finders. So to assess the discovery rates and the bounce rates of email finders, it's crucial to conduct a deliverability test. Some email finders seem to find a lot of emails, but in reality, when you use these emails, you will find that many of them bounce. As a reminder, a bounce is an error message received by the sender after emailing an incorrect address. Therefore, it's essential to distinguish between the net discovery rates and the gross discovery rate. The gross discovery rate is simply the ratio of emails found by your email finder to the total size of your list. Again, this rate alone doesn't mean much. The net discovery rate is much more interesting. It's the ratio of the gross discovery rate minus the bounces. So we take into account all the bounces and we remove them to the total size of your list. Take aero leads, for example, which has an average gross discovery rate of 70%, which is quite impressive at first sight, but a bounce rate of 50%. Its net discovery rate is therefore only 35%. And obviously, it's the net discovery rate that really counts, since it tells you how many leads you can actually reach. Moreover, the bounce rate is also an important factor to measure. When the bounce rate is too high, it can degrade the email deliverability of the sender. It's generally advised not to exceed an 8% bounce rate if you send less than 50 messages per day and per inbox. If you send more messages per day and per inbox, your bounce rate should be lower than that. Taking aero leads again as an example, not to follow, a 50% bounce rate makes the tool absolutely unusable. So this leads us to the question, how do you conduct a relevant and practical deliverability test? There are generally three options to consider. First, use an email verifier as the source of truth. Second, export contacts from your mailbox. And third, send messages and count the bounces. Let's be clear, using an email verifier as a source of truth is a very, very bad idea. Tools like Never Bounce, Use Bouncer, Debounce, or Bounce Ban have several flaws. Firstly, their results can vary slightly over time. These tools operate simply by managing a large pool of IP addresses and using these IPs to make SMTP requests to ESPs. So ESPs stands for Email Service Providers. Essentially, they are just asking the ESPs, do you know this email address? The problem is that sometimes some IP addresses are blacklisted by ESPs and the request can't go through. A deliverable email will then be marked as unknown or risky. Secondly, these email verifiers are not good at bypassing catch-alls, while some email finders are increasingly better at it. I'm thinking especially of ICPs, of course, but also Apollo, Find Email, Enro, and some others. If you evaluate one of these email finders that have, to some extent, capacity to bypass catch-alls, if you evaluate one of them with an email verifier, you will find that many emails will be considered risky by the email verifier. If you decide to remove the emails tagged as risky from the results, you will then significantly reduce the performance of ICPs, Apollo, Find Email, Enro, and so on, skewing their final results. So don't use an email verifier as a source of truth. The second option, export contacts from your mailbox. The idea here is to export the list of email addresses with which you have corresponded over the past 15 days, for example. This way, you are pretty sure that these emails are valid. I say pretty sure because it's not impossible that some of them, some of these contacts, have already moved to a new company, meaning that their former email address is no longer available. But let's ignore that for now. Let's assume that all these emails are valid. It's a pretty fair assumption. Once you have your list of emails, you will generate the following 3 columns for each email. First name, last name, company domain. So the company domain is what just after the @ sign. You then provide these 3 columns to the email finders you want to evaluate. And you will see which email finders manage to find the original email address. This method has 2 advantages. It's quick to do and it costs nothing. But there is also a downside. You're evaluating the email finders by providing them with domains, not company names. And we know that providing the company name without the domain makes it more difficult to find the email, but also more interesting. So in a way, you're putting the email finders in an easier rather than harder situation. That's okay. The third option, which is by far the one I prefer, send messages and count the number of bounces. This is the best approach. It takes time and costs money, that's true, but it will give you the most reliable results. To send messages, you have two possibilities. Either you go through a service like Scrubby, which will handle all the heavy lifting, or you can create your own sending setup. Buy a domain, set up an inbox, warm up the inbox for 3 weeks, then send messages via a tool like Instantly, SmartLead, or Lemlist. Wait a few days, and finally retrieve the bounces. It's important to wait a few days because some bounces only arrive after 24 hours or even 48 hours sometimes for the very late ones. Most sending tools make it quite easy to export a CSV list of the emails that have bounced. There you go. Now you know how to conduct deliverability tests. I wish you a good benchmarking and see you soon.